Hello and welcome back to the Awakening Philosophy podcast. My name is Jed and we are reading the Phaedo together, exploring the Logos, calling in the Logos, trusting in the Logos, but trusting it with the art. The most important thing we're learning. So one way of talking about philosophy, of course, which is one of our great quests to understand what it is and what it isn't. We always need both because that's part of the dialectic. And we've come across many really cool ways of defining philosophy. One of the more recent ones we've got, which kind of nicely unifies or synthesizes all of our other ways of talking about philosophy, we've had so far directed towards being. What philosophy isn't is anything that isn't directed towards being, directed towards our physical world. A love of wisdom, of course. Yes, not boo for the physical world. A love of wisdom, which is the etymology or the origins of the name itself. Philosophia, love of wisdom. One of the definitions is to discover and follow the Logos. Last time, Socrates pointed out that those who are opposed to philosophy, those who spend their time contradicting the Logos, kind of betray us and can cause the worst defect of the soul, to think that there's no reality and there is no Logos. The third thing, of course, filling out the triad, is there's no skill and art of the Logos. But to think that there's no Logos, there is no sound, firm, what we might say as good and objective, in our modern language, understandable pattern to reality. Of course, if we don't live in an understandable reality, you could quite easily make the argument that our world is unjust. We don't want that. Humans have been described as always seeking. The human quest is to seek to find how this world is just. We're not content with injustice. We don't like injustice. When the referee makes the wrong call, we scream out in objection. Of course, many people play out injustice, and we try and either change that or what we call now cope. We take copium. We try and find a way of making it just. We seek justice. And if it's an irrational universe, or a universe that can't be understood by us, humans who have evolved to the level of language and self-reflection, then maybe that task is doomed. Fortunately, there is one, and the Logos is one of those. Yes, thumbs up. In fact, 2 thumbs up, which I think means fireworks. Yay. So the Logos is one of the defining things that separates what philosophy is compared to what it isn't. Of course, if there is no objective sound and good, but sound and firm, good and objective, understandable pattern or paradigm emanating through all levels of reality, of course, reflected from one dimension to another. If that doesn't exist, we're left with opinions. And this is a good way of defining what modern philosophy is, or the corruption of philosophy, or the big hurdle we have to overcome in humanity. Because if philosophy gives us what we need to understand and solve problems, or escape from the chains of fate, and understand and experience higher levels of reality, reaching our destiny and fate, then it's very, very important for humanity that we awaken philosophy. Also for ourselves. It's not guaranteed that humanity will survive its own self-imprisonment, as Socrates calls it, leading to its extinction. Many species have gone extinct. There's no guarantee that humanity won't be one of them. So it's important that we realize that we are greedy for philosophy for our own sake, as Socrates says. We can still learn the logos. We can still develop. And that has an implication in this life and in the next. And in our series of lives, these are the things that Socrates is laying out for us to discover. That there is an implication of how we nurture the soul in our next life, in how we are incarnated. So, and of course, my personal experience, this was the cause of a great deal of confusion for me. When I studied philosophy at college, they just threw a whole bunch of stupid opinions at me. Here are a whole bunch of really complicated, dry, boring, stupid books written by 18th century, 16th century people. Here's Kant's opinion and Nietzsche's opinion, and I didn't know what to do with it. First of all, I couldn't read it because it was so boring and dry and dull. Translations were very complicated, and nobody spoke like that. But most importantly, it lacked meaning. Why should I give a shit about this? Why do I care? So meaning, of course, is directing it to ourselves. How is this going to affect me? How is it going to make me happier? How is it going to help me climb the ladder of my own self-development? And how is it going to help me understand where I'm falling down? If this is just some opinion, if I disagree with it, does that mean I've got a problem? Could this be a cause of a problem that I have in my life, in my work, in my study, in my relationships? If I disagree with Kant's opinion, well, hang on a second, now I've got Hegel's opinion to learn. Which one is the paradigm? Which one is the truth, so that I can recognize where I'm missing the mark? Also, if it's the truth, does it provide a paradigm of incremental steps of growth that I can follow, as in all heroes' journey, as in all video games of that kind? There's a leveling up. Does it provide that paradigm of growth? Not really. Most of them just kind of say, this is what I think. I don't think there is a logos. I don't think we can know reality. I don't think there may or may not be a divine, but we can't know it. So, who cares? Get rich or die trying. Or just have faith. It's absurdity. So the big problem was it lacked a paradigm. Most subjects have a paradigm. If you study medicine, there's a paradigm. This is what a healthy body is. Paradigm of excellence. And this is how we can distinguish illnesses. So that health and its shadow. But of course, philosophy had that paradigm removed shortly after Socrates, with the counterattack to real philosophy with Latin philosophy, what we call now European or modern philosophy. The opposite of philosophy, or the corruption, or the shadow of philosophy. So without the paradigm, what do I do with all these opinions? Okay, Kant's opinion's different than Hegel's. So what? Who's right or wrong? No one knows. Bollocks. Of course somebody knows. Of course, because there is knowledge. So Socrates recognized the problems that would unfold in history in the next 2,000 years after his death, before it even happened. This is the significance of having a paradigm. It gives you what we saw in the text, prophecy. We can prophesize. Following Apollo, said Socrates, allows you to prophesize. Apollo, the god of philosophy. So you could predict, this is what follows. Oh yeah, the people who are going to come up after me are going to reject philosophy and be lovers of opinion, philodoxia, lovers of the body, philosomatos, philosomatos, which makes them either a lover of riches or lover of fame, philokrimatos and philotimos, and they're going to end up living their life as a lover of fighting, debating, arguing, contention, philonikos. Of course, philo means lover, lover of. And this is going to cause our war, our civil discord, our disharmony, and it's also going to cause the greatest defect of our souls, which is to think there is no reality, there is no realm of being. Oh, disastrous. There is no logos, there is no good, objective, sound, firm paradigm of understanding, the thing that everybody needs at college. If they're going to learn other philosophers, they first need to know the paradigm. For you to know what for you to recognize the deviations, you need the excellence, the model of excellence first. Otherwise, it's not really a subject if it lacks a paradigm. So that they'll claim there's no reality, there's no logos, and there's no skill and art of its use. The greatest defect of the soul, and this is what we have now. So all of the chaos, the war, the discord, the disharmony, the capitalism, the fascism, the exploitation, the wealth inequality, all of these things which are objectively harmful and unjust. In other words, objectively not an art. If art by definition benefits the subject, like the art of medicine, has a paradigm like we're just saying, then we can objectively state that these things are objectively wrong. Not a matter of opinion, not a matter of vote, not a matter of belief. Sound and firm, good and understandably unartful, unjust and wrong. But so, therefore, we need the paradigm to be able to judge. Because some politicians will go, oh yeah, of course, rich and poor is good. That's just the survival of the fittest. That follows the natural laws of the physical world. Some bears have all of the fish and they fight the other bears and they have no fish. Therefore, it's normal for there to be oppression. There's a lot of very famous right-wing conservators who make that argument. They have to, because they have to justify extreme wealth inequality. So famously, Jordan Peterson says, there's hierarchical levels of dominance within lobsters, therefore it's the paradigm humans should be following. Therefore, racism is fine, because it says that some people are worse than others. That's natural. Of course, there's no logos in that. It's false opinion. And it's not even clear, very good thinking based on his own level. But that's the appeal. The shadow of the logos, the shadow of the paradigm. But if we have the logos, and the reality, of course, allows us to reach our highest goals, but the logos allows us to distinguish what is wrong. That's not a matter of debate, just like any other art. If a doctor said, well, it's my personal opinion that I've looked at lobsters and sometimes they lose an arm and that makes them faster to get away from sharks. Therefore, as a doctor, I'm going to chop off every patient's arm, left arm. Well, hang on a second, that's not good. No, it's in nature. Therefore, it's good. We wouldn't allow that, even if it was his personal opinion. Even if he could cherry pick facts to say it's probable, that's science, probable. Of course, there's no knowledge. They can never verify objectively their theories. It's based on probability because it's always based on the physical world, which is probability. We can never see beauty itself. We can never see the paradigm. We can never see one or two. It's all probability. And that's what Simmias and Cebes are distinguishing. Their past ways of thinking were based on what's attractive, so familiar, prejudices, cultural beliefs, and what is probable, scientific thinking, not what is based on the logos. The logos being that objective paradigm which is also verifiable in direct experience because the reality exists too. So having the logos gives us what we need to point out, oh, that fascist is objectively wrong. Oh no, but he has a lot of followers. He has more than 50% of the vote. So therefore, who is to say? Well, that's the wrong question. Not who is to say, that's about people. What is to say, that's about the logos. I'm going to point to the logos. It lacks the logos. It conflicts with the paradigm. It does not help us purify ourselves from our problems and reach our excellence, fate, and destiny. In fact, it does the opposite. It causes problems. So one of the ways that we can distinguish philosophy from what it's not, and also see the stakes, the importance within humanity and within ourselves, because as above, so below. So the below would be the physical world, the everyday world, which we will outlive with our soul, as we are learning in the Phaedo, meaning the greater is our soul. Often Socrates talks about when you see eternity, this life will seem a petty thing. So don't be stingy. Don't be stingy with your with your money, and don't be what's the word? I can't remember what he said. He said something to do with honor as well, because you'll realize once you leave this world and enter with your training behind you, with your philosophy behind you, and the virtues behind you, you'll realize, oh, this life was insignificant compared to the whole of eternity. Eternity, of course, along with immortality and deathless and pure, and that which absolutely is, that which we stamp the seal, that which is, the hyparxis of all of the other ideas, all of these terms go into being, the object of knowledge. So we're developing our own dialectic for that, so we can have all these terms are unified together in our understanding of being. So being and logos and the art are the things that are rejected. So one way of defining philosophy is it's about being. It's not about the physical world. Yeah, lobsters can do lots of things, monkeys can do lots of things, but doesn't mean we should. Doesn't make it good. In fact, if we look at the physical world, we can see that all physical things reach out to being, but fall short because of their physical nature. That's a quote from Socrates in the Phaedo. All physical things reach out to a certain aspect of being, whether it's sticks wanting to be equal, whether it's beautiful things seeking beauty, whether it's everything we do as a human seeking goodness itself. We all seek the being. But also we have a secondary, Socrates says it's important to recognize its secondary purpose to remind others. The greater we can do this, the greater we'll be able to remind others that's their purpose too. It's secondary. Socrates says it's secondary. I want to know this to convince myself. If it is true, it will naturally be beautifully persuasive as a secondary effect. So we can dismiss words that vilify seeking your self-goals, like selfish, and we can see the irrationality behind the word selfless, because selfless is usually meant sacrificing yourself to help others. Selfless, without self, but that's absurd. The greater you can reach your self-being, the greater you'll be able to help others. Likewise, selfish, no, it's important that you reach your self-goals. Oh no, but it's selfish because what about others? Well, you are going to be a better light to guide others if you can reach self yourself. So we can recognize that's a language of the physical world, the back and forth competition of opposites that scientists often point to justify fascism, to justify injustice. Oh look, physical things are a fight between opposites. Look at that lion fighting the gazelle. One's gonna live, one's gonna die. Therefore, that's the way the world is, right? Well, that's the shadow of the logos in the world of becoming. It's not what we seek. It's the diminishment or the distorted reflection of the actual logos, which is win-win-win. The greater you reach your self-goals, win, the greater you benefit others, win, and the greater humanity becomes win. That's the ideal that we seek for. In fact, because it's universal, all physical things, we can call it not just destiny, but the destiny of man. Isn't that wonderful? Isn't this text worth reading? All of these things, Socrates dropped the breadcrumbs for us to discover for ourselves, which is itself a beautifully artful use of the logos. Isn't it just? Doesn't it make it simple? Doesn't it make it awesome? But isn't it cool that we can play? We don't have to just believe it or not because our parents believed it, like religion, or our culture believes it, like cultural prejudices and stuff. No, we have it for ourselves. And this is what Socrates is distinguishing. You have to develop. Okay, so now we've got two definitions on the table for philosophy. It's about being and not the physical world, not about lobsters, not about alpha wolves that like many modern people claiming themselves to be philosophers use. Oh, look, there's an alpha wolf in the pack. There isn't, but doesn't matter. The idea is to cherry pick physical evidence to support your own prejudices. That's what they do. Because they're lovers of opinion, philodoxia, and they're lovers of debate, philonikos, and they're seeking to appeal to the audience's prejudices. So they become audience locked because they want to get money from them. Philokrimatos, lovers of riches, and they also want to be famous and popular, get those likes. So that's philotimos. These are all of the kinds of loves that are the distortions that cause our problems, that Socrates pointed out as what happens if you're not a lover of learning. Philomethesis, that becomes a lover of philosophy, lover of wisdom, which is being. Logos directed towards being, philosophia, and then a lover of phronesis. Some experience of being that you then integrate through your virtues that you've been developing, a kind of learning that upgrades you as a soul. So, more than 2,000 years ago, Socrates saw us clearly, exactly like an art. This is the third thing. Being, the understandable paradigm, logos, that's open to all, that can unify all people, because if it's objective and true and good, we can all share in it. The third thing that's rejected by those anti-philosophers is the art. The art allows you to prophesize. The art of medicine, if somebody came into your office with an alcohol problem, they have an alcohol addiction, you would have to look into the future. Say, oh, I'm not going to prescribe this medicine because he's likely to drink. I know he's going to drink. I can use my art of understanding healthy bodies and kinds of illnesses, the thing in the shadow, to recognize in the future this is what's going to happen for him. Diagnosis. Prognosis, one of those two. Socrates is doing the same thing. He can look forward into the future of humanity and diagnose the consequences that will follow humanity. Diagnose our illness. Prophesize what's going to happen for us. Isn't that amazing? Showing that what's by those who are non-philosophers, because there aren't a lot of us at the moment. But this is the period of history that we're entering into. We're going from a level before the logos, based on groupthink, very much akin to evolution. Inside the cave is good and safe. Outside the cave, if you don't have logos, can be scary. And before we have logos, as humanity, we have to have it kind of was a way of solving a problem. The problem of having no light at nighttime, and the problem of saber-toothed tigers. It was a solution to a problem that no longer works. Groupthinks, and that's our society now. It's run by groups, by little teams, often religious groups too, bound together in this kind of belief that's anti-self. Doesn't allow for being to exist and be knowable, doesn't allow for the logos, an understandable paradigm, replaces those with an idea of God and belief. So being and understanding is replaced by religious belief or atheism and faith or probability. And of course, without those two, you can't have the art of the logos. So this is the third thing, a kind of way of unifying those other two. For an art, there has to be some ideal or paradigm in being that's not changing back and forth like lobsters and bears go back and forth between opposites, hungry and fed and sleeping and awake and nurturing children and fighting other animals. It's not that. It has to be sound and firm, good and eternal, objective. So that's the paradigm. That paradigm has to be understandable to all humans who want to play the game, because we're all at that level of evolution now. How far we go in this lifetime is up to you. But it needs to be brought into the light for ourselves and secondarily for humanity. That's the logos. And those things together, having the paradigm, having the understanding of it, will allow you to function with it in a beneficial way. Firstly for yourself, secondly for others. That's art. Or those are elements, key elements of art. So Socrates, if he's able to diagnose the conditions right here in the 21st century, he must have a kind of artful professorial or predictive ability. Therefore, aspect of an art, he should be able to diagnose. This is the problems you're going to have. That's our world. All of the problems can be unified under this understanding. As its cause, that's one of the ways of synthesizing what is more causal. And also, you have to offer as a doctor a prescription. What do you have to do to overcome this illness? And that's what he's doing in the text. That's his swan song. Not leaving behind a bee sting, leaving behind the best thing. So, what we're left with now, because as we're going along, we have a more unified way of understanding what philosophy is. What is philosophy? The art of the logos. What isn't it? An absence of that art. It's no longer to benefit. It no longer has a paradigm. It no longer has an understandable system. It no longer has a skillful use. It can no longer address problems that we face in our world every day, many, many ways. And it can no longer have that which can lead us to our excellence, to reach the paradigm itself. Isn't that interesting? Art of the logos. Just one phrase. But he's saying, hey, I may be using the art of the logos to demonstrate through the dialectic, through this question and answer, not debate. We ain't Philonikos here, but through back and forth questions together. I can use this art to demonstrate that the soul is immortal. But if you're not learning the art of the logos yourself, then one of these Philonikoses can come along. They're going to use an argument that's popular or feels true or is probable based on science that's going to convince you otherwise, and you're going to be led into disarray. You're going to end up doubting the logos and then hating and despising the logos. That's going to be the worst thing for your soul, because you won't reach truth and being. Now we can add something else that we've seen ourselves, because not only are we defining what philosophy is and what philosophy isn't, Socrates has said, hey, dudes, you also have to define what the virtues are and what it isn't. After his doctrine, he went on a huge tangent, maybe not a tangent, a huge side quest, we could say, to define the virtues and the vices. In fact, he didn't define the virtues. He left that up for us to do, which is an artful use. Teacher doesn't give you the answers. He gives you what you need to discover the answers yourself, because in doing so, you're learning how to think for yourself. And he's saying you need to learn the art of the logos. So we did that. We did our dialectics on virtues, and we saw one of the key distinctions between virtues and vices is whether or not, let's take the first one, the belly, the biggest part of the snowman, the biggest part of our soul, our inward desires, that which seeks things for ourselves, like sandwiches. You can master some desires, and people call that even-temperedness or temperance or sound-mindedness. I don't know what we would call that today. Maybe even-temperedness or self-discipline, maybe. But the word is sophrosun in Greek, and it's usually translated as temperance or sound-mindedness. You can master some of those desires so that you can get good at doing other ones. I'm going to master my drinking problem so I have more money to spend gambling. That kind of thing. But of course, that's not real sound-mindedness. That's mastering some physical desires to be mastered by other physical desires. So what makes actual virtue different? Well, it can't be being mastered by physical desires of the body. In fact, later on he goes out of his way to say, hey, if you spend your life seeking pleasures of the body, you're nailing your soul to it. Self-imprisonment. That's the kind of nurturing you're doing. That's going to affect your reincarnation. And as a result of that, you're going to come back as a donkey. Or a wolf. Or maybe if you're not too bad, something simple and social like a bee or an ant. That will get eaten by a chicken. So there's an effect on our incarnations. Of course, we want to escape the cycle of reincarnations in the macro and in the micro. In the immediate, we reincarnate into our problems, don't we? We go up and down. We might have it inside, or we might feel good about ourselves, but then, we go back into our problems. Each moment is a kind of reincarnation. Especially if, when we get back into the Parmenides, which uses the dialectic to point out stages of enlightenment experiences, there's one that has an experience of being in the moment, or between each physical moment. So there's a potential. It's the film strip way of seeing reality. The film strip is a series of still images that are so quick that it gives the illusion of change and movement. That's a film strip, and there's a way of viewing physical reality like that. Meaning in each 1/32 of a second, I'm not sure what the actual number is, but between each microsecond, you can experience being. It's a level of enlightenment, usually associated with the Kashmir Sufism, their highest level. But that's a teaser for when we get back into the Parmenides, which is what? Applying that paradigm, understandable logos, directed towards being, in a skillful way to understand the levels of enlightenment. So there's our techne. There's our art of the logos. So, the significance of seeing it in the moment is, well, how often do we want to do that? Or how often will we get distracted, pull it into our physical world as being most real and true, looking for physical things like lobsters, like our friend Peterson. How often are we looking at being, and how often are we reincarnating into the physical world to look for things, to search for the self? Which is interesting because the self doesn't have qualities that can be seen or heard. So why are we looking through our senses to find the self? If our goal is to know the self, if that's our destiny, if that's the first and final cause. Okay, so that's our micro and macro. The macro would be, or the micro, depending on which one you want to look at, our reincarnations after each life, not just within your life, but after the life. Where are you going to reincarnate into next time? This is the interesting thing about it, because Socrates defined the doctrine of philosophy as the art and practice of death and dying. Well, not just your final death when they bury you, but during your life, separating your soul from your body. So, like reincarnation happens in each moment, so too can philosophy happen in each moment. You can separate, purify yourself from the shackles or the imprisonment of our physical senses that can distract us from doing this. Come pouring in, flooding in, drive us out of our mind, he says. I currently have a toothache, and yeah, that can come in and drive me out of my mind and make it hard to do philosophy when that pain comes up. A little personal anecdote from Dr. Pierre Grimes, somebody else who's mastered the art of the Logos, who passed away recently. He talked about being able to watch his tooth pain. He got, I think, several teeth pulled out without any anesthetic. Very little breathing. Very little blood loss, interestingly enough. And the dentist said, I've never seen anybody have teeth pulled without anesthetic. And I've never seen anybody fall asleep in my dentist chair. He goes, I wasn't falling asleep. I was watching where the pain went. So that not identifying with our physical pleasure and pain is part of it. And Socrates says, the problem is if you see pleasure and pain as most clear and real. Now, real is something we've got in our back pocket because we've been developing a dialectic of being, because part of philosophy is seeking truth, which is truth and knowledge, which is in being. The other part is phronesis. So real is something we've got with us. Clear was a new word he threw in, which is a question, which is a puzzle. If there's a state of enlightenment where you reach pure being, beauty itself, justice itself, the brilliant light or pure bliss, these kinds of adjectives or aspects or ideas are used to describe it. You can also describe it as its hyparxis or its fullest flowering, self-ousia. But if that's what is being or knowledge, what's the state of clarity? So that's a question. Often that level of enlightenment, as we pointed out, the Kashmir Sufism, is to be able to see the gap between each frame. That one that we just described with all of those idea, not forms. One of the great betrayals against philosophy is to describe the aspects or qualities of that as form. It's a way of not teaching philosophy properly. The word is idea, which is beholding, an aspect. That enlightenment experience is often called associated with the Taoist experience of their highest division. So this is interesting. We can use the dialectic because it's a paradigm which is needed in an art to understand and hierarchically order different spiritual traditions based on their highest vision. Also, we'd have to define them based on their understanding of that vision, which is interesting because philosophy is the spiritual tradition which has the logos. So I think you'll find, universally speaking, they will all be lacking in that sense. However, there are some, like there's the ox-herding bhikshas of Buddhism, which show a potential for developing a logos of the different states of enlightenment. But that's a bit of a tangent. That's a bit of a teaser for when we get back into the Parmenides, and we can, as we read the different levels of the dialectic applied to the oneself, what are the different levels we can, like, oh, that reminds me of Buddhism, or that reminds me of Taoism. So that can be fun. So we're talking about the art. and not identifying ourselves with the pleasures and pains and nailing our souls to the body in the immediate and in our reincarnations. So a little bit of a anecdote there, talking about what it's like, which is important. It's nice to have people that you can point to, because if we seek this for ourselves, one of the questions is not just how can we define it, but how can we recognize it once we're there. So the art of the logos is what can bring this all together. It can allow us to diagnose, can allow us to prophecy, look into the future, can allow us to heal ourselves and reach our excellence. Isn't that cool? And Socrates is giving us the clues in the text, which is why we read. So, and equally so, within this paradigm, you would be able to recognize the way of thinking where your vision has reached the level of Peterson. The back and forth, or in his understanding as well, vision and understanding of the physical world. There is a kind of shadow of the logos of being reflected in our physical world. So if you're making your decisions based on what you see in the physical world, a lobster does this, a bear does that, and therefore that's my highest vision of reality, then we can reckon, that's the seventh hypothesis of Parmenides. Well, that's the seventh category along the 9, or the 8, plus an extra one in the dialectic. So that's interesting. And the more that we see it, the more we'll be able to see through it. That's the significance of logos and understanding. Once you've made it yours, you can see through it. Makes it fun. And once you see it clearly, it's fun to talk about it. Like playing music. When you start playing music, it can be scary to be on stage because you're trying to remember all of the patterns, all of the chords, all of the lyrics. But once you understand how music works, you can have a lot of fun. I think then you're in the jazz realm where you can just speak through it. Same thing with the logos of philosophy. So, our quest has been to define what philosophy is, and now we have a cool new word, art of the logos, and because we're reflecting on it, we can see the stakes and the implications, and because we can see there's a universal drive towards it, as Socrates has pointed out, all physical things seek this level of being, but fall short because they're physical. Seventh hypothesis, or whatever it turns out to be, that's a bit of a teaser for when we get back into Parmenides. All things seek this, therefore. Another question is philosophy, or the quest to do and master, if it's an art, it can be mastered. If the quest to master philosophy is the archetypal hero's journey. We can point to our friend Joseph Campbell, who studied different mythologies around the world, different heroes' stories, and realized, there seems to be an archetype that they're all various levels of reflection of. So even today, if you do screenwriting, you'll probably have to read The Hero's Journey or The Hero of 1,000 Faces to point out that there is a kind of hero's journey that the main character has to go through. And once you know it, you can have fun looking at terrible movies. There's a podcast that I like called How Did This Get Made? And it's people who have a background in screenwriting and acting, and so they're familiar with the hero's journey. So having seen the paradigm, they have a podcast where they watch terrible movies and they say, how did this movie get made? How did they not realize the hero has to do this thing? How did they miss the part where there is a call to action, or a supernatural realm, or a learning, or a coming back home? All of these aspects in the hero's journey, and if you're interested, you can Google it. You can use your paradigm to have fun pointing out where certain films miss the mark. It's a fun podcast. It's a comedy podcast. But there's an aspect of art. These are actual people who have studied the paradigm, studied screenwriting and acting and directing. Likewise, this was what was missing in philosophy, the way it's taught at college. Same with psychology, by the way. Because if psychology is the understanding the cause of our problems, then we can identify it as the shadow of the logos, the vices. So instead I did some psychology at college and we tortured rats. Which I think is Hegel or Bacon's theory, that we have to torture Mother Nature so she will reveal her secrets. Terrible stuff. But the problem I was talking about is, well, so we can torture rats, and so what? What do we do? Come up with a theory about rats to extrapolate to humans? This is silly. Or, so in philosophy, I have to read Kant and Hegel. How did this get made? How did this get written? Well, actually, this philosopher happened to be funded by the church. And he was Kant was very Christian, you see. And that's why he said, you can't know the nature of being or the divine, but you have to trust it because God wouldn't trick us. Another philosopher would say, way of solving that problem of how do you know without there being? It's rude. It's impolite for a good Christian to ask these questions. This kind of horseshit. Now, without the paradigm, I can't have fun, like How Did This Get Made, pointing out where these bad movies or bad philosophies miss the mark. It could be really, really fun. It could be like How Did This Get Made podcast. We could have fun. Oh, look at Kant. We can all have fun and laugh at him and maybe give him credit for what he did see, or I don't know, some level of logos, but have fun when we recognize where he's missing the mark in the paradigm, in the actual hero's journey, which is the philosophy being the archetype that gives us the stories that work in mythology, that appeal in mythology. There's a reason why certain movies are terrible. Well, it's because they don't follow the hero's journey, but there's a reason why there is a hero's journey. So with the paradigm, we could have fun and not gatekeep philosophy. Another big problem with philosophy is gatekeeping. You have to, and I use this not in a derogatory sense. A friend of mine would say you have to have a certain level of autism to want to read all these books without any meaning, without any paradigm, without any purpose. These dry, old, poorly written books from modern philosophers or European philosophers. It's gatekeeping. No one wants to do that. It's boring as heck and stupid. Like, master these terrible movies. Why? No one wants to watch them. They're awful. If you watched good movies and you derived the paradigm from them first, then it can be fun to apply it to the bad movies. That's what we miss. That's the gatekeeping aspect of philosophy and the pointless aspect of psychology. They simply lack the paradigm. And Socrates is pointing that out. Hey, you need that paradigm. It's being, it's the logos, and it's the art of the logos. Art of the logos has it all. If you don't, you're going to reject being, and you're going to say, oh, I'm most wise because I'm so clever because I say there's no being. A smug atheist or a philonikos, you could say. Or I'm so smart because I think it's just all opinions. We can't know reality. There's no logos. A smug modern philosopher or a debate bro, something like that. So even back then, he was using his art to diagnose the problems we have now. So it's our job to listen, to heed the advice. A master of the art is talking to us. Engage. Like, we don't have to pay for this doctor's visit, thank goodness. That's another thing. There's so little gatekeeping in philosophy, it's literally free. We can read this. We can join this community. We can join this Discord. Of course, I'm trying to find a way of sustaining myself, so I'm exploring options with Patreon because this is so important, but this will always have a free, and we can always read this for free. No gatekeeping. So we have to listen. If he's diagnosing our problem, we have to listen to him. But he's saying, don't just listen. Oh, thanks for the heart and chat. Don't just listen, but you have to learn the art too. For your own soul. If there is a kind of archetype of the hero's journey that any good film director or film writer or TV writer has to learn, otherwise they have to go back to college. If there is a similar paradigm that the hero journey is based on, that every soul has to learn, otherwise they have to go back to soul college, incarnations, what we call the Paideia, physical world as the spiritual learning school, then we have to learn it too. We can start by listening, but we have to apply ourselves. So all of these little clues we've put together and seen, oh my God, he's diagnosing us 2,000 years in the past. That's amazing. But if you go to a doctor, you have to listen to them. But he's saying you have to be a doctor yourself. You have to develop the art of the logos for your own soul. So that's what we're doing. We're learning the paradigm, but also we're learning what it isn't. So we can recognize shysters, con artists, scammers. We say there's no being, there's no logos, and there's no art. And what you should seek is money or fame, but not lover of learning. That becomes a lover of wisdom when you recognize, oh, the virtues. Wisdom is one of the 3 virtues, of course, to do with the virtue of reasoning. So we talked about sophrosun, or temperance, or sound-mindedness, being your inward desires. We said, oh, if we don't want to nail our soul to our physical body, when we master some desires, the part that wants to eat all the cookies, which is very noisy sometimes, or cookies are so delicious. If we want to master that, to do what? To eat all the cake? That's not going to work. To save money so we can gamble? Ugh. What is the remaining desire we apply it to? Now, we're going to read the Republic soon. Maybe at the end of this one, maybe we should take a break because we're talking about the virtues so much. We have hypothesized that it's what makes the virtues, not the vices, is that the desire that you unify the mastery of your other desires towards is the desire for what reasoning wants. Same thing with courage. What do you hold on to is actually true and actually false? While you outwardly move, that part of the soul moves outwardly. What reason says is true or false? So all the 2 other souls is being guided or ruled by reason, which is very interesting because our triad, one of the triads, is ruling power and activity. The top part of the triad is the ruling term, and the ruling term of our soul is the top part, usually associated with the brain. Of course, that's not the brain, it's because we can separate from our physical body, so it's not physically the brain. In fact, that's Simmias's argument, the god that we represent with the goddess Harmonia, that our thinking is our brain, or a byproduct of our brain. We put that to bed, hopefully, and learned some of the art of the logos in the meantime. But that is the ruling part of our soul when we are harmonized. And what does that seek? Truth and reason. Because it's the planning part. It needs to plan rationally, and it has to seek truth in its planning, in its thinking. Oh, hang on a second. Where is truth? That's in being. That's what we're learning in our reading. What is the archetype or the ideal of reasoning? That's the self-logos. So it seems to be the virtues are characterized by following the self-logos, or aiming towards being, or now we have a way of unifying those two ideas, art of the logos. So the art of the logos is what makes the virtues virtues and the vices vices. This is so important, because we're not just lovers of wisdom, learning the self-logos, following the self-logos towards self-being. We're also developing the virtues along the way, which is, Socrates says, this is why we're a lover of phronesis. Lover of learning becomes a lover of wisdom, becomes a lover of phronesis. And phronesis is this mysterious, we're still on the hunt for, by the way, 45, so episodes in, we're still on the 43, I think, episodes in, we're still on the hunt for phronesis. But it's the kind of learning that changes us, is a virtue, doesn't lose its power, therefore we can take it with us into our next life. Compared to eternity, this life is short, but this is the virtue that remains. This is what we're really after. And what makes the virtues virtues? The art of the logos. So, keeping that in mind, we're doing it. And by the way, in our last argument against the goddess, the Theban goddess Harmonia, was the soul can't be harmony because the virtues are harmony. And if the soul is harmony, it can't be disharmony because by definition, it's not disharmony. It's like saying equal. We actually touched on this when we were talking about the sticks. You might see two sticks as being equal, and your friend looking from a different angle says, oh no, they're not quite equal. So they're seen as equal and not equal. But equality itself, or in the Greek, self-equal, could that ever be unequal? No, by definition, it can't be its opposite. Equal. So that same argument, he's pulling back and saying the same thing applies for the soul. If the virtues are a kind of harmonizing, then you can't call the soul a harmony or a harmonized byproduct of our physical brain, which is a common opinion today, because then there'd be no virtue or vice. Of course, this is something that is believed. There is no virtue and vice. Therefore, get some terrible tyrant who's so comically representing all of the vices like Donald Trump. And we have no way of calling that out, because we don't know how to distinguish virtues and vices, because we do so with the art of the logos. Again, we need the art of the logos. And using the art of the logos, as Socrates used with Simmias, he was able to define the virtues, giving us an extra something while addressing the problem of the soul. The question on the was, is the soul immortal? Well, yeah, it has to be, because I'm also going to teach you about what virtues are. Why is that important? Couldn't he have addressed the idea of the soul being harmony a different way? He could have, but he's already brought in the significance of the virtues and vices. So it's already significant. We've already got a question. What the heck is the significance of the virtues? I thought he was just going to define what philosophy was. Give a defense for philosophy and living that life. What's this virtue stuff? Oh, brought it in again. That's a question. It might be tied with that phronesis thing. So the virtues are a kind of harmony. And we looked at our soul. Okay, if we desire the art of the logos, or the logos directed towards being, and the art of the logos tells us what's true with our courage. Like courage isn't like charging the army on your own isn't courageous, it's stupid. You have to have some reason to think it's good to do that thing. What's the ideal of reason? The art of the logos. What do you desire to have for yourself with your inward part of the soul? Mastery of the art of the logos. What should you use in your planning and reasoning? Well, the art of the logos. So the virtues can be characterized by this. And that's a kind of harmony. They're all harmonized. They're all singing the same note in their different ways. They're all playing a G chord, but at different octaves, you could say. Now, so our questions: what is philosophy? Got a new way of defining it, art of the logos. What is virtue? Well, harmonized, the soul harmonized towards the art of the logos. That's pretty cool. So, if there is such an art of the logos and Socrates is using it, we need to listen. We need to pay attention. But he's saying you also need to learn it. And of course we do. If we're here to learn, how much do we want to learn? When I first went to college, I went into the college library and it was huge. It was many stories tall, and there was so many books, and I thought, what the heck am I doing here? I have to read all these books to be wise? There are so many and they're endless. And even if I did, there are going to be some contradictions. One book's going to say one thing and another thing. I was so overwhelmed. There's a part of me that was excited to be in this kind of a place where there's love of learning, but how do we master it? If I'm here to learn, I can't read all these books. I just don't have time. That can't be it. If we're here to learn something which is the ideal, it can't be learning every opinion or every physical fact. It's just not possible. So what is that ideal? Same question too, what is the ideal of the hero's journey? If we're here on an adventure, that makes a film a good film. That makes a game a good game. That makes a life a good life. What is that hero's journey? Just like at the library, what is the ideal thing to learn? What is the ideal way of being, of acting? By the way, those two questions, we could put it to the soul. I go to the library, what is the ideal thing to learn? Oh, that's that wisdom part of the soul. What's the ideal adventure to go on? The ideal hero's journey. That's the courage, the outward moving part of the soul. And we can add that third thing, which is a good thing this is why we have patterns, why we look for patterns, why we find triads, because once we find two, that's enough for a pattern. Like a limerick. In music, a limerick is a good example to talk about this. The first two lines of a limerick follow the same meter. It's enough to establish a pattern. So the third line is different. The third line is going to be different. And then back to the same. And songwriting, it's kind of like an archetype for songwriting. So the point is, two is enough to establish a pattern. So what should I learn? What's the ideal learning? What's the ideal hero adventure? Oh, let's fill in that third thing. Let's speculate. Let's hypothesize. Desire. What's the ideal thing to desire? Well, we desire things that make us happy, but also that permanently make us happy. That's the best kind of desire. When you love something, you think that they're good and beautiful, but you want to be with them forever. Not just a one-night stand. So what is that which you can have that's good and beautiful and can last? And you can make it yours. Well, these two were the art of the logos. Could the ideal good that would have the ideal benefit that is lasting, that you could make yours? Does that fit? Kind of does. Interesting. So I'm learning more about the art of the logos by applying the pattern. This is the fun part, solving the puzzle. So we can use that. Oh, the art of the logos is the ideal desire. That's curious. I never thought of it that way, but it makes sense. What do you really want? Something that's a one-off, a one-night stand, or something you can always have that you can apply to any situation. Like the Fonz, he doesn't just have a one-night stand, he goes into any bar. Okay, I'm being silly, but the Fonz is a cool guy, a typical cool guy from I don't know, 70s sitcom, Happy Days. He was so cool when he just walked in anywhere. Hey, he was so cool. His coolness was his, that he could pick up any girl anywhere. That was his premise. It was his way of being that would allow him to benefit in every situation. Well, is that the art of the Logos? A way of being, a mastery of which you can take anywhere, even into your next life? Therefore, we've learned something new about the art of the Logos. Ourselves. Which is what we're saying a hero needs to be able to do. Define it, demonstrate it, pass it on away in a way that it can be upgraded. That we can see it in a new and better way. So that's what we are doing. We're matching Socrates. We're going to learn the art of the Logos, and by nature of it, us learning it for ourselves, by nature of us doing this greatest adventure, this ideal adventure, we will naturally level it up in a kind of way. We'll add to the tradition. And hopefully, as it's our goal, it will have the secondary benefit. So we're getting rid of selfish and selfless, replacing it with self-logos, or art of self-logos. So are you being selfish? No, that's doesn't make sense. There's no such thing as selfish. Are you being selfless then? Sacrificing yourself to help others? No. You only help others by being greedy for the self-logos, for the art of the self-logos. The greater you can reach that art, make it yours, the greater you can help others. And which is secondary, by the way. It's for your soul. The world might not come along. This humanity could expire tomorrow. We have the nuclear technology to do that. But it doesn't matter. For you, be greedy for the self-logos. Be greedy for the art of the self-logos yourself. That's what Socrates says. That's what we're going to do. As a byproduct, the greater we can shine our light, the greater we illuminate others. So selfish, selfless becomes maybe self-full or self-ousia. Are you self-ousia or are you physical? Are you being self-ousia, pursuing self-ousia through the art of the Logos, or are you in a problem? And what level are you at, and where are you stuck? The two questions. So with those questions in mind that begin the dialogue, we're going to see, does Socrates start with that? Because he's finished with Simmias's argument. He's moving on to Cebes. Is he going to characterize it with a mythological figure? I think the answer is yes. Cadmus, I think it was. He's going to ask, okay, where are you at? And where are you stuck? Balloons. How far up the art of the Logos are you? What's your vision and understanding? And what are you stuck on? So we can use the art of the Logos to address it in an artful, beneficial way, according to a paradigm that's understandable, Logos, directing you to the ideal being. More balloons. That's the beneficial use of the art. So we're going to see how he does it, so we can learn it ourselves, while ourselves being benefited from the argument ourselves. Because, thumbs up, it might be a kind of argument that is attractive to us. That, we outlive many forms of our body as we grow, but not our last one. Or maybe there is reincarnations, but can't they just wear out your soul? Maybe this is our last reincarnation. The argument of you don't outlive the last jacket you're wearing. Cadmus. The god Cadmus. So, exciting, and we're going to benefit from the doctor's prescription while learning to be doctors ourselves. How's he doing it? Those are the questions that we have coming in. Let's jump in. All right. Beyond belief. Just to recap, last time one of the cool ways. So following the Logos was one of the ways that we talked about defining philosophy. following the art of the Logos might be a cool upgrade. But one of the cool things is the Logos helps us out. In fact, this is one of the greatest quotes that exist. It's the opening passage to the Philosophical Midwifery book. Let me bring it up. Everybody should know this by heart, including me. I memorized it once, but I forget it. It is entirely possible to verify for oneself that we are part of a caring and intelligible universe. The verification is a kind of proof, since it is a way of understanding that is based upon a realization that our mind constantly communicates with us and for our benefit. Which means if there is this art that we are on a quest to learn, and Socrates on this text is in a quest to pass on to us, if there is an art of the Logos, then wouldn't mind be using that because it's communicating with us for our benefit. And one of the key ideas of art is benefit. So, this is a Dr. Pierre Grimes quote, awesome one. And of course, we are living in a intelligible, which means both understanding and knowable. So both being and Logos, the two things that are rejected by Philonikos, peoples who love contention. Of course, it would make sense, right? If there was a good, objective, firm paradigm of understanding, you wouldn't have room to fight over opinions. It's just whether or not you want to learn it and how we can support each other in learning it. So of course, if you're a lover of fighting or debating or arguing or all that stuff, you would want to say that there's no Logos. Also, you'd have to say there's no being, because if there is a way of verifying for ourselves, as the quote says, what we're learning, then what do you have to fight about? You're either there or you're not. So, all the implications for all these personal beliefs that we start wars over, out the window. No need for that. We can grow up. We can be rational. We can enter the human race. So, entirely possible to verify this. The intelligibility has both being and Logos, the two things that we deny. And by the way, if we do not deny intelligibility, being, and Logos, then we will just have one philosophy, wouldn't we? We would have the philosophy, not a philosophy. So people who love fighting over, oh, well, actually, Kant says this. Well, actually, people. Actually, I believe it was Heidegger who said, well, actually, no, not actually. It's just a thing, just the philosophy. You'd have to reject being, objective being, and objective understanding, being and Logos. But both of those words are within the word intelligible. And that quote says it's entirely possible to verify for ourselves that we live in an intelligible universe. In the chat, now if I can get midwifery on ebook. Oh, that's a good question. I do not think so. I haven't been able to find it on ebook, but maybe. In fact, that's a good question. If it's not available on ebook, it might be worth flicking a text to the publisher and say, hey, get with the times. I want it on Kindle. Yeah, I also got a Kindle too. Most of my reading is on Kindle now. So let's see that quote one more time. It is entirely possible to verify for ourselves that we are part of an intelligible universe. So if we're verifying for ourselves, then maybe the best way of verifying is through ourselves mastering the logos and being, so mastering the art of the logos. But not just that we are part of an intelligible universe, that we're part of a caring universe. So that's interesting. We've been talking about our role in reading to match Socrates. For us to be able to judge whether or not he succeeds as being the ideal hero in the greatest hero story, we have to ourselves have what we need to judge. We can't just throw our opinions around like, oh, well, I like Socrates, so yeah, let's make this the greatest story. Because I like him. He's pretty cool. He's boss. You can't do that. You can't, and or you could say, Socrates is old. And I remember learning at school that evolution means that all of the newer ideas are the better ideas. So, and he didn't know about the internet, and he didn't know about modern science, so he's probably not very good. So this wouldn't be the greatest story. Whatever's new is better. Socrates is skibbity. You can't say that. Well, you can say that, but it wouldn't have any validity. We need to have what we need to be able to judge properly. So, what does a doctor need to be able to judge health and sickness properly? He needs the art of medicine. So we would need the art of the logos for us to be able to judge whether or not Socrates is successful, which is interesting because he says his job is to pass on the art of the logos. We need to learn it too. So it's kind of harmonized. Our interests are harmonized there. And back to this quote. So if we have to, therefore, if he's using the art of the logos and we need to learn it, and all of the terrible things in our world follow if we don't, and in our soul, of course, too, we have to match Socrates. Well, if the universe is communicating with us, it would have a kind of language through which it does so. And for our benefit, it must have an understanding of the ideal that we are seeking in order to have a paradigm to judge what's beneficial, right? And we talked about non-philosophy, the way it's taught at school, lacks the paradigm, so we don't have a way of judging whether or not Kant is good or Hegel is good or whatever is good or relativism is good and blah 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 is good. So in order to benefit, like a doctor, you need the paradigm of the healthy body. So if the universe is communicating to us for our benefit, it has a language of communication and it has a benefit, so it has an ideal. By the way, what are the two things that we've already recognized are within the triad of art of the logos? The language is the logos. The ideal being. So, it is entirely possible to verify for ourselves that we are a part of a caring and intelligible universe. The verification is a kind of proof, since it is a way of understanding. So we have to develop a way of understanding that is based on a realization. So it's an understanding and an insight or experience that the mind constantly communicates with us and for our benefit. How do we see that? If therefore the universe is communicating through what we're calling the art of the logos, we have to match it to be able to receive the communication. By the way, the receiving of that communication has a Greek term, providence. So, just as we have to match Socrates in the art of the logos, so too do we have to match the universe, the artfulness or the wisdom and communication of the universe. And hey, it might be the same thing. So that's interesting. You have to match him. And again, that quote, Socrates has a saying in, I can't remember which dialogue, if it's worth saying many times. So if it's a quote worth seeing, it's worth seeing many times. So here it is again. caring and intelligible. So there's not just the artfulness inherent in intelligibility, but there's a caring aspect. So we need to look out for that. It's a living intelligence. It's a caring, it's bestowing. It not only knows about us, but it knows about our ideal. And it knows something through which it can communicate that information about where we're at and where we're stuck relative to the ideal. That's caring. So with that in mind, maybe we can shed some more light on this weird thing that when we sometimes when we come to conclusions, like we came to a little conclusion of our own about the art of the logos, then the very next paragraph about trusting the logos, we saw that there was a pattern emerging. Socrates was relating to the logos in interesting ways. Let's bring up the notes that we did on it. We realized he was where is it? Where's it at? You have so many notes now. Here we go. We realized there was a pattern, and there's a pattern. We write it out because we're playing. That's playing the game. He was. So there was a certain ways that he was relating, and so we pulled out those terms, the key terms in that pattern. He was looking at the logos from self. That was interesting. He wasn't taking ownership of it. In fact, after he addressed Simmias's argument that we call harmonia, Cebes was like patting him on the back. Oh, you're so great, Socrates. And he's like, no, don't say it like that. That's going to jinx us. But it's from the self. Somehow this logos is unfolding from the self, which kind of resonates with that quote we just read from the Philosophical Midwifery book. The universe is communicating. Interesting. Wonder how that relates to self. We call in the logos. Socrates calls in the logos. Socrates is pursuing the logos. Socrates is receiving the logos. And finally, he was trusting the logos. So we did this little dialectic and we realized, hang on a second. The logos is a definition. We want to share in the logos. That's how we started. How can we share in the logos was a question we brought into our reading. These are a set of self-logos terms, or a set of key terms. That sounds like the division stage. Definition, demonstration, division. Therefore, let's finish the game. This is what happens when you start to notice patterns. You can finish the pattern, solve the puzzle, gain new insights that might be surprising and new. So how do we do division? Well, which of these words more hierarchical than the other ones? Or does any of these words encapture the rest of them? And we said, well, actually trust. In order to receive, you have to trust the logos. In order to pursue it, you have to trust that it's worth pursuing. To call it in, you have to trust that it will receive the call. To look from self, you have to trust that it will happen without you doing it. And you can watch. You can watch mind. Watch mind unfold the logos. So, from the division stage, we recognize that this doesn't have to be. You can find a new word that unifies all of them. You can maybe see another term as more fundamental, or more important, or more relevant, or more causal, or have greater scope. But for me, it was trust seems to have a greater scope over the others. So that's the fourth stage, synthesis and analysis. So that's the synthesis, and analysis is bringing it back. Therefore, the fourth stage is synthesis. Here it is over here. Therefore, what does synthesis do? Finds that key division. Analysis refers it to the start. So here we have the start here, and here's our synthesis. So analysis means trust the logos. So we saw it in a new way. And in order to understand and share in the logos, we should trust the logos. So that was a cool thing that we did. And then right after we did that, almost the very next paragraph, Socrates goes on to say, hey, by the way, you must use the art of the logos when you trust the logos. Holy crap. He was saying, oh, all of these negatives follow. These great problems being doubting, like people who end up getting betrayed by people without using the art of judging people, end up hating people, which is a metaphor for, hey, if you trust the logos without using the art of the logos, you will find someone contradicting the arguments and you'll end up doubting yourself or doubting the logos. And then especially if there are people who think that they're wise and clever because they're really good at contradicting the logos, like we have nowadays, you might end up reviling and hating the logos. This is the greatest defect of the soul, and it will mean you won't reach truth and being. So this came right after we came to this conclusion. Is that a coincidence? Or coincidence is what you have left over if you're not seeing the logos. So this interesting symmetry, or what we would normally call coincidences if we don't recognize we live in a caring and intelligible universe, has to be understood. This might be the caring side. That quote again. It is entirely possible to verify for oneself we are part of a caring and intelligible universe. The verification is a kind of proof, since it is a way of understanding that is based upon a realization that our mind constantly communicates with us and for our benefit. So did we just come to a certain realization in this reflection that there is a communication from mind through the logos, which is being communicated through the text? Even Socrates is saying it's coming, he's looking at it from self. So what he is saying is not from him, but from self. So if the universe or self is communicating from us, was that a kind of realization that when we came to this conclusion, by playing, which we're being asked to do, doing the dialectic, doing it for ourselves, this message, hey, you can't just trust. By the way, if you happen to come to the conclusion that you should trust the logos, which we just did, you have to also include the art of the logos in that trust. So is that a kind of proof, a kind of verification that the mind is communicating to us and for our benefit? If it is, we need to look out for that. We need to be playing, look for questions, create our own hypotheses, our own possible solutions, carry them with us, and see if the logos unfold in a way that responds to us, just like our dreams do. Now, I mentioned dreams because Socrates also mentioned being guided by dreams, following the instruction from his dreams earlier in the text. So, with that in mind, we talked about one of the distinctions between what philosophy is and what it isn't is this one. It's beyond belief. By definition, the realm of being is beyond belief. It's unopinable. So people interested in belief, like what people normally consider philosophy to be in this point in time, is not it. It's beyond belief. So we came to that conclusion, and then funnily enough, the word came up. Also, we've been talking about fate and destiny. These words came up. Could be a coincidence, or it could be the logos of the self reflecting back in a caring way. And not just caring, but we can understand the caring nature of it, intelligible way. In a marvelous way, you might say. Wow, that's pretty cool.
Wow.
In chat, oddly enough, with my schizophrenia, I hear voices. Often they act more like Kant's sense perceiving daemon rather than a helper. Interesting. So on the topic of the universe wanting to find our path and help us along it, what should I listen to? Can't listen to senses, perception, mind, thoughts, etc. That's interesting. So in the cave analogy in the Republic, Socrates talks about the voices from so in the cave, we are tied to the back of a cave, watching shadows on a wall represent the physical world, the images that we see, but we don't actually see things the way they are. Those shadows are reflections from man-made objects casting those shadows. We can't turn around and see them. But these man-made objects cast shadows on the wall, and we take that to be the physical world. So certain man-made beliefs, perhaps, causing us to project our beliefs onto the physical world, and that's what we respond to. We project. We think, oh, that person must be thinking this about me. And they're almost never thinking that about you. Usually they're thinking about themselves. But it doesn't matter. It's what we feel. It's what affects us. The beliefs from our past. Now, those people who carry those beliefs, like the things that are attractive or familiar, just like these arguments from Simmias and Cebes, these beliefs we get from our religious and family, usually upbringing, our culture, the ones that seem probable and attractive. The people who pass them on to us, they have voices. We can hear them talking in the cave. Their voices get reflected off that cave, and we think, oh, those voices that we hear, they're from these shadows, but they're not. The people carrying the man-made beliefs, the man-made objects that are casting the shadows, there's a fire behind them in the cave, casting the shadows onto the back wall of the cave. We are prisoners, chained, shackled. Interesting, because being chained and shackled to fate is one of the things that we're seeing in this text too. So we mistake the voices as coming from the shadows, our projections of what we perceive in our physical senses, but actually they're voices from the people who pass on the beliefs from our childhood. Those are what we call and sometimes call the negative daemon. The loudest voices we hear are the projections from the pathologos, from the people from our upbringing when we were very young, before we had learnt the art of the logos. So going back to the text here, Socrates points out, hey, by the way, this greatest condition, the sick condition, that the translator, this greatest defect that the translator recognizes as the pathologos, comes from people who we thought to be our nearest and dearest friends and family, we could add, that we think to be trustworthy, truthful, sound, and trustworthy, but then we discover this person is base and untrustworthy, and after many blows like this, we will end up to believe there is no goodness in humanity, and we end up hating humans. But really, it was because we didn't make use of an art in artfully judging the nature of the humans, whether they are trustworthy. And he said, by the way, if you think of two extremes, and of course this reflects what we've been talking about, two extremes, the ladder up, the logos up, the art of the logos up, and its shadow. These are the extremes. This would be extreme tyranny. This would be perfect clarity and enlightenment and fulfillment. The majority are between these extremes. Everyone is a certain level of development up their understanding and seeing, and a certain level of force of their problem playing out in their life. So, and the art requires judging. So yeah, you are told to believe your parents when you're little because you haven't learnt the art of judging where they are. Your parent might be here, the next door neighbor's parent might be here, and so on. The majority are between these extremes, the very useful and the very worthless. So useful is the word benefit. Actually, let's nail this word down, because useful, I should be benefit, because benefit is so key. That word is Christos. Christos. Christos means in Greek useful, good, serviceable, or useful, good, serviceable. Okay. So I want it to mean beneficial, because beneficial is such a better word. Good, useful, kind, gracious. Alright, good and useful. We can say benefit. So the very beneficial, artful, and the very worthless are rare, very rare. So we're between those, okay? So if you had a contest of worthlessness, the winners would be very few. There's very few that are actually worthless. So the sick condition happens when anyone puts their trust in the logos. That thing about trusting people is a metaphor for the logos. That cave is about beliefs. Those voices pass on beliefs. The voices that we are reflected within our mind, what we even project on others or hear within our mind. So we can't just trust them without the use of the art of the logos. Socrates often talks about treat your mind like a friend. If your friend said, oh, you suck at that, you wouldn't go, oh, I guess I suck at that. You go, hang on a second, Bill, why did you say that? What did I do that made you think that I can't dance? Did I not dance awesome last week? You'd ask questions. You wouldn't just trust them. And you would use the art of the logos to whatever level you are yourself, whatever level you can climb that ladder of the art of the logos, you'd use that to judge him. If so, you'd believe it to be true and then shortly after false, especially from those who spend their time contradicting the logos, haters, we call them. People who think they're most wise and they alone have thoroughly understood that there is no soundness or stability among being, the realities, and the logos, and the rules of an art. Those are the three we were talking about. But there really is a logos that is true and firm and capable of being understood. But if you don't blame your own lack of the art as the cause of that suffering, you will shift the blame away to the logos itself, spend the rest of your life hating and reviling the logos. So, in your words, you can't listen to senses or perception, mind and thoughts. Could that be a conclusion? Because mind is ultimately being. Thoughts can communicate the logos. So could this be what you're going through? You've blamed reality or mind itself or thoughts itself as the cause and not your own lack of the art of the logos. Now we have to guard against that condition. It's a dangerous conviction. We must maintain a philosophical attitude about self. And those who are unenlightened have this contentious attitude. And they don't know which logos, so which voice, either conversation with the person or conversation with the voices in our mind. They don't know whether that logos maintains phronesis and ousia, the virtue and being. So this is our paradigm. Do those voices lead you to perfect your virtues, to reach phronesis and perfect your own understanding? Do the voices lead you to discover cooperatively, together in the dialectic, that you have a noble and divine nature and that the reality is understandable? And it's the logos, it's self-logos, so it's your most basic and highest language, it's yours. Being is your own mind, it's reality itself, but it's also the hyparxis of your own consciousness. And all of that is an emanation from self, so that's the nobility. Does the voice do that? Does it maintain your phronesis? If it doesn't, it might be the voice of the negative daemon, or those who are lovers of fighting. Philonekos. So this is another thing that we can benefit from the art of the logos. To discern which is the negative daemon, that projection from our past, from people who claimed to be wise but weren't, but we had not yet developed the art of the Logos because we were young, so we just believed them? Is it that? People who are love of fighting? Or love of opinions? Or is it... Oops. I dropped my pen. Or is it the voice from self, which is usually quieter? Either way, we want to engage with them. The same way Socrates is listening to self, through which the Logos unfolds, but he's also listening to his friends. So whoever it is, we want to engage artfully. Whether a doctor gets a excellent patient with a healthy body in, or a person with cancer, he's going to relate to them through the art of the Logos. That's what we need to do. Now that usually the negative daemon is a much louder voice. So we've been talking about purification. So part of the art of the Logos is purifying ourselves from being bound to fate. Now those bound to the chains reflect the cave analogy, but he talks about getting a clarity. The clearer we are, the more we're able to hear the quieter voice. So we want to purify ourselves from the false beliefs from the negative daemon, which binds us to fate. If you keep believing it to be true when that inner critic says that you suck, you will end up sucking. But if you can realize that that's not reality, that's just because of a lack of an art of the Logos, and you can apply what you learned on the dialectic to philosophical midwifery to answer it with the art of the Logos, you can free yourself from that, allowing you the freedom. It's not the end of the game. You haven't reached excellence, but you have a freedom to reach excellence, to listen to actual mind, communicating actually providentially in a caring, intelligible way. But it all rests on how well we can learn and employ the art of the Logos. Now the thing is, wherever you're at, you have what you need. In other words, if you start to play, if you've learned a little bit of the dialectic, a little bit of the Logos, use it. And if you play the game with integrity, because of the caring nature of the universe, it will turn around and help you. So let's read the chat. What about listening to your feelings and follow what excites you, without expectations of the outcome? Excitement from the state of excitement is the path of the heart and the path to self. You will find you and keeping you. Again, are you being excited by your fate? I'm excited about drinking beers on the weekend. Will that lead you to yourself, or will that keep you suffering the same cycles of problems? Now, if you can apply the art of the Logos and do the activity, the discipline, the practice, the habit of the virtues, notice they're not in there already. You will naturally be interested in this. That's the appeal. Follow your bliss is appealing for those who don't want to learn shit. They want, oh, well, my bliss is when I pick on people smaller than me. Well, hang on a second. Is that actually what's good and beneficial? We need to judge whether or not what we're attracted to is good and beneficial. In the text, we see there are certain false beliefs that were attractive. So at the end of this false belief that the soul is like harmony and dissipates, Simmias says, it came to me without demonstration, with probability and attractiveness. This is why humans believe it. Thumbs up. So again, we want to practice habitually the virtues until we awaken those insights. But you don't start there. You start being attracted and excited by false beliefs from our past. Or What's attractive, if you haven't purified yourself from those false beliefs, is doing it to others. Hey, if you got beat up on all through your childhood, then it can be attractive to be the bully, because that gives you a temporary break. So a lot of people are attracted to positions or jobs where they can be the bully because they're no longer the victim. A lot of tyrants were bullied themselves. Trump is a good example. Hurt people hurt people. So it's not just what's attractive. It has to be what the Logos outlines as legitimate and good. Now, there is the initiation when you can experience reality itself, and then it naturally will be attractive to you. This is that initiation that Socrates has been talking about, and might make the virtues the phronesis virtue. But until then, we have to follow the Logos. Following a path not for the end, but the end goal for the journey is the better way. Through my question is more about what can guide myself when I cannot listen due to the adding crap from the experience. Right, so the journey, but there is an end too. So, again, this is new. Only in the last 5 years have we had the text to rediscover what Socrates is teaching us. So, most of what we think about philosophy is going to be bullshit. We have to keep that in mind. It's not a personal thing, it's just the way that humanity has unfolded. So, without the art of the Logos, which require all those things, the people who claim to be most wise in our culture here and think they alone have thoroughly understood, they think they're smart because they have understood there is no soundness or stability among the realities or any Logos, and all that exists without the rules of art. So they will say there is no goal. There is no ultimate goal. There is no destiny. There is no completion or achievement. That's going to be attractive to us because these people sound wise. They're wrong. Socrates is saying they're wrong. They're missing the mark completely. If there is a reality and we seek being, and that's what the reality is, then there is a goal. Like literally, there's a goal. If there's a path through the Logos, there is a method. It's not pick whatever religion you like. There's actually, like medicine, there is actually a healthy body. There is a goal that you can reach. Being healthy, free from illness. And there is a way of getting there. There is medicine. There is the art of medicine. So there's the art, the Logos, and reality. And so that's why we have the idea of destiny. There is a goal. So yeah, the journey is to reach the goal. But also there's the next part, like Socrates in the Republic talks about, once you reach that goal, encouraging people to come back like Socrates and engage in the art of the Logos to help others reach that goal. But it's important to recognize those voices or those opinions or those ideas and say, is this in the text? Is that what Socrates is saying, or is that what feels right to me? If souls can come into existence, thumbs up. Can souls come out of existence? If a soul existed and then come out of existence, was it immortal? Yeah, that's what we're on now. That's what we're on now. So, Simius thought that the soul is like harmony. Like it's like playing a guitar. The harmony that you create is the last thing to be made. You have to have the wood. You have to have the strings. You have to have those strings tuned. You have to pick them. But also it's the first thing to go. So people think that the soul is a byproduct of our material, physical body. Then they'll think, oh, well, yeah, when we die, our soul goes. Just like harmony. So we've just gone through that argument. And of course, you can watch the videos on YouTube or for a week on Twitch, I think. But yeah, so that argument against harmony was represented by the goddess Harmonia. And now we're on to Seebees' question. Well, okay, maybe the soul existed before we were born, but who's to say it's immortal? Or, no, not who, that's a authority question. What is to say it's immortal? So this theory of learning as remembering, okay, we've gone through that. So everything we learn, we must have known before we became physical. So obviously our soul existed before we were born, and for a long time before we were born, but that doesn't necessarily mean for him. He's been stuck on this for a while, by the way, because Socrates has provided other arguments to show that the soul exists after death. So he's been stuck on it, but he wants to know, okay, like let's think of your incarnations like clothes. Yeah, you outlive your clothes. You are more real. Your soul is more real than your clothes. But you don't outlive your last cloak, your last jacket. So maybe this is our last incarnation. Maybe our soul has reincarnation, but it's not immortal. So that's on the table now. Can Socrates use his art of the logos to contradict what's familiar, attractive, and probable with modern science? Can he use it to contradict that, to show what's true through the art of the logos? And can we learn how to use the art of the logos ourselves? We don't want to just trust Socrates. We want to see how we can know for ourselves, because someone could come along and provide a convincing argument, especially if he touches certain prejudices from your culture or from your religion, can trick you, con you, and get you to think, well, there is no goal, there is no understanding, there is no immortality of the soul, or I can't know it. These sort of things that can wash away your purpose here to know these things. It has some input that's useful or things to be learned from, but also creates problems where there is none. Right, so this is the reflection of the negative voices from the past that haven't been addressed with the art of the logos. And that's philosophical midwifery. It's applying the dialectic to those voices and seeing how they demonstrate, seeing the implications of having them there, listening to them, believing them. So it's definition and demonstration, dividing it up, seeing all the different areas they come up, but also dividing it up through time. Does this voice have a history? Does the feeling state, when you believe it, have a history? And again, we talked about division a bit earlier. From division, you have to find the most causal or earliest or most with the most scope. And we did trust when we talked about trusting the logos. So there'll be an earliest experience of this voice. That's what we want to identify. And it's usually a childhood scene with a parental figure who, of course, they don't have the art of the logos. But we also didn't have the art of the logos to ask the right questions. But now, by being in this text, by applying it to these questions, these good questions you're asking, we can go back to that scene, division, and then apply the art of the logos to see what's really going on. And were they really trustworthy? Or maybe they were stuck. And if we believe them, we will pass on we will accept the family curse and be stuck ourselves. But there is a solution. You can solve problems. This is the new paradigm of psychotherapy. Up until now, psychotherapy is thought to be kind of hit and miss at best, because it lacks a paradigm, just like philosophy. So it's been thought of as an eclectic tradition. If you're a psychotherapist, you just pick whatever you like and cobble it together, and this is my personal psychotherapy. But if it was actually an art, there would be an actual paradigm. And that's what we're learning in the art of the logos, the paradigm for actually freeing ourselves from our problems. Actual psychotherapy. Just like Socrates is saying, hey, this is also the actual stages of development towards your spiritual goal, the end, the first and final cause. So that he's saying this is actual enlightenment. And there's a quote where he says, From the Phaedo we're reading, many are the staff bearers, but few are the inspired mystics. Many of the people who call themselves spiritual, but few are the actual spiritual people. Those are those who are, according to my opinion, none other than, bring it up again, those who practice philosophy correctly. Now, we don't want to just trust that. It's nice to hear that all the religions and all of the spiritual cults and spiritual traditions, that's many. It seems like a big hogwash of bollocks and confusion. They all can't be right. If there are 1 million religions, or if there are 100 religions, 99 of them are at least wrong. Same thing with spirituality. So it's nice to hear that there is a single one, but we need to understand why. That's the art of the Logos. Why is there one? Well, if there's a paradigm of solving problems and of excellence, then the same thing we ask of any person, where are you at, up, and where are you stuck? What's the nature of your problem? Or how far along the freeing of your fate are you, your problem are you? The same thing with traditions. How high is the Buddhist vision and the Buddhist Logos? Where are they at? What is the nature of their block? Where are they stuck? Any ashram, any Buddhist center, any temple asks the same question. Judaism, where are you at? What's your level of the Logos ladder up? Or the art of the Logos, how far up the art of the Logos are you, and where are you stuck? What's the nature of the imitation? Someone who appeared wise because they were old, or because they quoted Moses, or because they were your parents and you're in a free state. No, we're Jewish people, we don't do that. Well, that's the first time my mum's ever spoken up like that. It must be real. This must be the caring and intelligent universe that we seek. It was the imitation. So that's what we were seeing as the nature of vice. Vice isn't an absence of virtue, it's the shadow, it's the distortion. Like our mirror. Our mirror isn't the absence of us, it's the distorted reflection of us. It lacks the Logos. Your mirror reflection doesn't have understanding, doesn't have knowledge. When you raise your left hand, it raises its right hand. It's distorted. So this is how we can understand for ourselves the art of the Logos solves problems and reaches our highest spiritual goals. Discern feelings of what's genuine excitement for you and grow familiar with the feeling of truth. Right, so we want to distinguish Logos and nous, dianoia and understanding, from opinions. So there's lots of different feelings that, like racist people, if their racism feels true. But we want to go beyond feelings associated with prejudices, opinions, and feelings to what is true. Now, that's the virtue of courage. The virtue of courage is going with what the Logos says is true, even though it doesn't feel true. That's courage. It will feel like something else is true, because that's your upbringing, and you haven't learned the art of the Logos, and your parents didn't know the art of the Logos, and their parents before them, and before them. So it's literally going against what feels true and following what the Logos says is true. Now, as you grow and you start to have experiences of reality, so we see that in the text, start to have okay, let's find it in the text. When you start to have experiences of nous, or reality, because let's go back to the doctrine and Socrates outlining what philosophy is. I hope I'm not sounding like a contentious person who's just contradicting what is being said in the chat. I hope I'm introducing the Logos to explain what's in the text. Here we go. to separate the soul from the body as far as possible, to be accustomed to gather herself together from all quarters, collect self by self out of the body, dwell alone by self as far as you are able, now and in the future, liberated as it were from the chains of the body. This liberation and separation of the soul from the body is called death. Those who practice philosophy in the right way are always most eager to liberate. And this liberation and separation of the self from the body is the self-exercise of the philosophers. So the more that you have this experience, and of course, those who practice philosophy correctly are studying to die, and they fear death least. And they go on to say that's a true philosopher. You will never encounter phronesis, this virtue that we're after, this virtue that isn't put in through habit and discipline. The virtue of courage is doing what the Logos says is true, even though other things feel more true. Of course it does, because you start by looking through your senses. So what you are accustomed to is your physical world, pleasures, pains, fears, and desires. That feels real and true, but Socrates says don't follow that. You're nailing your soul to the body. That's going to harm you, going to prevent you from reaching truth, and it's going to affect your incarnations. You only get the phronesis, the virtue that you trade those discipline virtues in for, the one that is yours forever, doesn't lose its power, is more divine and innate. You won't get phronesis when you're in your body. You will not encounter pure phronesis there, anywhere but there. So it would be irrational for a person to fear death, because that's what we want. Now, he's also been talking about this is why he doesn't fear death, but the last thing we read was, he said, look, we want to demonstrate that our soul is indeed immortal and indestructible, so that a philosophic person who lives in this way, who is about to die, is supremely confident in the face of death, that they will lead a better life in Hades than if they had died while living differently in a vice way. So this experience of separating the soul from the body, either during our life or when we die, has to come after practicing these virtues. The way we lived is significant. So it's not just dropping acid at a festival. You have to be practicing these virtues. You have to be learning. What's the learning called? The art of the Logos. So you're right. In the sense that once you do experience that, and you have the understanding or the Logos to recognize what you're doing, and you have the practice of the virtues, you will be able to integrate it to the virtue that is automatic. So if courage is holding on to the truth in spite of the ups and downs, pleasures and pains, fears and desires of the physical body, that can be hard if you only know the senses through the physical body. You've only experienced the world of becoming. That you can remember. Obviously, before you were born, you read somewhere else. But if you start to have this experience, you can encounter that which is more real. So it's going to be obvious that this is true. So courage will be more automatic. Same with your desire. If sound-mindedness, temperance, is desiring the truth of phronesis or the art of the Logos experienced in reality. And by the way, all of the things we learn in philosophy, thumbs up, beauty itself, justice itself, if you experience the perfection of beauty, then no joke. Of course you're going to desire this. So temperance is going to be easier. Because of course you want the most beautiful thing. So you're right. When that happens, then it's going to be easier to just follow your feelings or follow your intuition by the way, that's intuition. So intuition is that fourth dimensional kind of guidance. So maybe we can distinguish feeling from intuition, because feelings are very much directed towards your body, your senses, what you're familiar with. But once we can encounter that fourth dimension being, then we can awaken that always present or always powerful virtue of phronesis and intuition. And of course, that's the flow state. While it's discipline and effort, and you have to keep coming back to these videos and these readings and keep sharing your thoughts in the Discord and everything else that we do to keep doing it as much as we can, that's the practice of the virtues. Well, once you get to where we're going, like, oh yeah, well, I don't have to fight myself. I don't have to fight my physical, my upbringing, my the way I have previously nailed my soul to my body. The nurture of the soul, Socrates calls it. You don't have to fight against that. Or not fight, dialectic against that. Treat yourself as a friend, as we're saying to Gabe Dub. Dialectic, practice the art of the logos. Talk to those voices. Hey, do you realize you're stuck? Where are you stuck? Where are you at? You are not saying good things about self-logos, self-mind, and the self. Therefore, you necessarily have a problem. Where did you get that problem? Let's look at the logos. Where are you stuck? Practice the art of the logos, as we do with our friends when they're in a problem. So that when we reach being, we can take the art of the logos, integrate it into this intuition feeling. So you're no longer at odds, and that gives you that flow state. A nice description is in the ideal of the samurai, to act with the full force of your being. So you're not divided, you're completely harmonized because, you know, you've verified. That's that quote again. Entirely possible to verify for ourselves. You have to verify it. Your goal is to get there. That's why there is a goal. Where is that? Verify it. Entirely possible to verify for yourself that we are part of a caring and intelligible universe. The verification is a kind of proof. You've proven it by that's knowledge, by the way. That's what's knowable. So with the full force of your being, you're not divided. You're the ultimate virtue. If the virtues are harmony, you're most harmonized. Without thinking or planning. You don't have to be thinking about it because you know it. And hopefully you can practice this over and over, because the yoga, as we read, as much as you can, both now and in the future, accustom yourself to gather yourself out of the body. So the more you're there, the greater your memory is going to be. So that's that flow state where you're intuitively acting with the full force of your being without thinking or planning, most appropriately for the situation. So back to the chat. Okay, cool. Psychic practice, understanding how to move energy through your body. Right, this is important too. Moving energy, being able to feel the energy. Often it starts from your gut, which is interesting because that's where our virtues start. The biggest virtue is in our belly, and our breath can help with that. Hara is that part of the stomach where you can feel the base or the welling of psychic energy, or ki. If you like Dragon Ball Z, it's ki. If you like Chinese Tai Chi, they call it chi. Well, there it's in the thing, in the word, in the name. That's also important for philosophy. Socrates points that out in the Republic. So we mentioned using the art of the logos to judge people and whether or not they're trustworthy. And we talked about applying that for philosophical midwifery. He calls that music. To be able to judge the state of mind, the way they are harmonized, the kind of virtues they have, and the state of mind they have, and by the way that they talk as well. All this to judge the state of mind of other people, music, and gymnastics. So yeah, that's a good idea. Move energy through your body. That's great. Yeah. So if Bajib, if you're a expert in that and you want to share that, That's awesome. Maybe jump on Discord and share the techniques that work for you, because we would all benefit from, myself included. I would love to hear about it, from learning how to see and move energy within the body. That's gymnastics. Gymnastics and music, by the way, he introduces before the virtues. They're kind of precursor for the virtues. It's easier to practice temperance, courage, and wisdom when you have this gymnastics or psychic energy. And it's easier not to be let down by people or conned by people when you have music, the ability to judge the states of mind of others. Like in Platonic Gnosticism. Cool. Interpreting, okay. Do you mean psychicism? I've had dreams of the future. That's cool. So as we learn the art of the logos, we can apply it to dreams. And just like we've seen that there are categories of levels of mastery of the art of the logos, or levels of enlightenment. If you reject being, you're down the bottom. So like our friend Jordan Peterson that we make fun of sometimes because he's a funny dude, who looks at physical, like lobsters, looks at physical world, doesn't look to the realm of being. Or materialists or relativists. They're what happens if you think being doesn't exist. But if you think being does exist, they're a whole different level up there. Religious people think that there is a divine that exists, but they just can't access it or understand it. There's no logos. Buddhism, Taoism, so forth. Just like you can use the art of the dialectic and the art of the logos and the structure, the paradigm of the dialectic to judge levels of spiritual enlightenment, so too can you use it to judge kinds of dreams we have. And so in the chat, Gavdub is talking about how one class of dreams, just like one class of spirituality or one class of understanding, one class of dreams is prophetic dreams. And Socrates has been talking about being prophetic here. Because he is a servant of Apollo, the god of philosophy, he has, page 48, the swans who sing their greatest song not out of grief, but at the end of their life because they know where they're going and it's something good there, they are prophetic. And I believe inasmuch as they belong to Apollo, swans, they are prophetic by having foreknowledge of the good in Hades, and they sing and rejoice on that day. I also regard myself to be a fellow servant with the swans, and by the way, self. Self is a servant to Apollo, like the swans, and dedicated to the god of self. So Apollo is some kind of god of self. Interesting, because he represents philosophy. I possess the art of prophecy from my master, not inferior to theirs. So if we master Apollo, which maybe is the art of the logos, and we have that as our master, ourselves mastered by that art, then maybe we can uncover prophecy the same way our dreams can. So we talked about matching Socrates as the ideal hero by learning the art of the logos. We talked about matching the universe by learning the way in which the universe is caring and intelligible, by being that ourselves, which might be the art of the logos. And also we can add a third, matching our dreams. As shared in the chat, sometimes they can be prophetic. Well, Socrates says he can be prophetic by as much as he is mastered by Apollo. So we can match the intelligence, the intelligibility, and the caring of our dreams too. And the greater we can do that, the greater we can benefit from that art and become artful ourselves. That's cool. Oh no, I encourage the chat. Just know that I guess my job is to tie it into the text. So yeah, it's nothing personal. If you say something, then the text says something else. I'll go, but Socrates said this. So take that on board too, and change your mind. And again, that can be challenging. It ain't easy to change our mind. I'll give you an example. When I first got into philosophy, I was angry at the political system. It seemed like the Democrats and the Republicans were just saying the same thing. They were no different. It was all a big scam. And then philosopher Dr. Grimes, of course, said, oh, by the way, look into, the campaign leaders, Karl Rove and these sorts of people on the Republican side, compare them to the Democratic side. And there was difference. Now, I was still annoyed because the good guys, the Democrats who were supposed to be progressive, weren't actually progressive. They were still doing terrible things, but they weren't as terrible as the Republicans. So I kind of said, they're all the same thing, really, even though there are differences. And he asked me, well, hang on a second, wasn't that just the opinion that you started with? Didn't I point to some things you could learn about to change your mind? Why didn't you? And I said, you know what? When you're on the Titanic and the Titanic is sinking, it's better to, it's easier to rearrange the chairs on the deck of the Titanic, like slightly adjust the opinions you already have, than to save the whole goddamn Titanic, than to completely change your mind. So I might point to the text as you chat and say, oh, by the way, there's this thing, which may require to change you to change your mind. I just want to acknowledge that can be tricky, difficult, puzzling, confusing, confronting. That will literally trigger these guys. So we have the logos up. That's the logos we're learning. Let's get rid of the chicken scratches here. So we have the art of the logos that we're learning from the text, which is very different than what we believe. We have to do the work, which is why the virtues you put in to begin with. But we also have what feels right, what feels true. So when I point out something here from the text, it's going to trigger the negative daemon that we've been talking about, that negative voice that says, no, you don't, you're wrong, screw you, or screw this guy. His ears are too big, his nose is weird looking, don't listen to him. All of these anti-logos things to contradict the logos, because this is why fate is more powerful than enlightenment. Because there are many people who have had experiences of being. Give them a week and they'll be back in their problems. Because this, what feels true from our earliest days, our prejudices, our pathologos, our cultural influences from our childhood, is more powerful than even an experience of enlightenment. That's why you're not enlightened when you take acid. You might have a glimpse, or you might have an experience of being, sure. That's also why even those who try and climb the ladder, like a Buddhist or a Taoist guru, if they're not equally applying the dialectic, which you don't have if you don't have the art of the logos, to their problem, you might reach a certain level of enlightenment, but they still got their problem. So you have archetypes like the pervy sage, Naruto's guru and Goku's guru, or the drunken master. There are many archetypes like that, which is just simply, but the thing is, we can understand those archetypes just like we're understanding the archetype of the hero's journey. We can understand, oh, that's because they haven't learnt the art of the logos. So I appreciate and I encourage you to have chats in chat. I might point out something up here that's going to make you mad, but that's not you. That's that voice, the echo from our past that we think is true. We love our parents. We think they're beautiful. That's why it's so powerful. So I will encourage you to change your mind. But it will be difficult. But I hope you keep a good spirit about that challenge. By the way, that's courage. To follow the logos from the text, develop the art of the logos, even though what feels true is going to be in opposition to it. That's the human task. So just pointing that out. We love our teacher. Oh, thank you. Thank you. I thought of a way to sustain yourself outside of Patreon. Udemy. Make a course and sell it. I'd buy it. Oh, thank you. I'll check that out. Thanks. I'll check that out. Udemy. Make a course on Udemy. Thank you for that. Oh, and by the way, Socrates is pointing out the art of the logos is recognizing that if we had what do you say? If we had a contest for who's worthless, very few would win. Very few are only on this ladder. Just like very few are only on this ladder. In fact, to quote Cebes, tomorrow when they put Socrates to death, there might be no one left. So we have ideas and thoughts. There's going to be a mixture of some. What we call in philosophy, both true and false. So this is again applying the dialectic. So there might be an idea of like just for example, following your bliss. Now, there is a lot of truth in that. Follow what your highest inspiration is, what your highest vision is, using your highest understanding of that vision, what excites you the most when using your highest vision and understanding, applying everything you've learned about philosophy, that's legit. But there's a way that you can use that some people use it to talk about not applying just what's comfortable. Like, you know what? I would really love to be famous. That's me following my bliss. I want to be famous. That's down here. So that idea can have two possible expressions. But Socrates is saying it's likely going to be somewhere in between. Following your bliss is probably not going to be on this extreme. Maybe Socrates, once you have phronesis, you will be. But you're not going to be a complete worthless tyrant that your bliss is taking over the world. And what makes me most excited, said Hitler, is enslaving the world, bringing in the Third Reich. Okay, that's worthless. You don't want to follow that excitement. But it's probably going to be somewhere in here. And the thing is, we need to learn the art of the logos to discern the true from the false. Now, that's actually within the dialectic. We're learning the dialectic. Let's put it up here, actually. Just to recap the dialectic has side A, if it is, side B, if it ain't, if it isn't. So today we've been talking about what is philosophy and what isn't philosophy. And understanding that in various ways. What philosophy is the logos. What it isn't is opinions. What it is directed towards understanding being. What it isn't is using the physical world as your principles, like Jordan Peterson and his crabs, his lobsters, right? Or evolution. Oh, evolution means it says this, therefore that's our paradigm, right? What it is the use of the dialectic. What it isn't is arguing and debating and putting people down, that kind of thing, gatekeeping. Now we had a better term today, or a cool term, a unifying term. What it is the art of the logos. What it isn't is lacking the art of the logos. And there are four categories. Definition, defining it. So what is philosophy? Oh, art of the logos. What isn't? Lacking the art of the logos, you could say. Or that's what it, so you want to phrase it positively. What isn't philosophy? the non-art of opinion, you would say. Demonstration. How does that function? Well, the art of the logos functions to purify ourselves from our problems, our fate, and climb the ladder of the logos to our destiny. The kind of learning we call Paideia, that's to benefit in this life and in our further incarnations. Division. How does that divide up into other areas? We talked about if we had philosophy in the world, we would have better education, better justice system. We wouldn't have capitalism and fascism and enslavement and tyranny. But if we would have, so that's what it isn't. So we would have rational, harmonious, peaceful, exciting, free world. If we don't have the art of the logos, we would have conflict, war, division, enslavement, poverty, wealth inequality, all the things we're suffering through today. And all of those people who claim to be philosophers who ain't. All people who claim to be wise and smart because they reject being. They reject the logos. They reject the dialectic and its art. That's what they think makes them clever. That's our world. And then from that we have synthesis, analysis. And we've been talking about that today. How from those divisions, can we find a term that's more encompassing or unifying or more causal? We talked about trusting the logos has a scope over the other one, so we use that. We talked about in midwifery, the earliest scene when we first heard those voices that reflect in our lives now. That has the causal, it's the most causal and it's the most powerful. That's what we want to find in midwifery to address with the art of the logos. So we've seen that step. Now, what I'm introducing is for each of those four categories used in two essays, A and B, there are three possible subsets. You can say what is true about it. You can say what is false about it. And what is F-A-U-L-S-E, I think that's how you spell false. And you can say what's both true and false about it. So what is philosophy? Oh, it's the art of the logos. What's false about it? Oh, you would never say philosophy is personal opinions. Or you would never say it's unverifiable in direct experience of reality. What's both true and false? Well, what is philosophy? It's an art. What do you mean? Well, it's true that there is an art and a logos, but it's also false if you think, but it's not any other kind of art. Because any other kind of art that we're familiar with is usually to do with the physical world. Is that true? No, I guess not, because you have art of mathematics, I suppose. Oh, how about this? What can you say that's both true and false? It's beneficial. It's true that it's beneficial for your soul, but it's false in that it's not beneficial. It's not going to make you lots of money, unfortunately. So these are the things you can say, what's true and false and what's both true and false. And the reason why I'm bringing that up now is part of the art is to recognize that everything is somewhere between the extremes. Not everything, most things. So this idea of following your bliss or trusting your feelings is going to be in this category, both true and false. It's true in one way, that if your feelings reflect reality and the art of the logos, then that's absolutely what you need to use as your guide. We can call that intuition. That's the true part. But it's false if your feelings reflect your fate, your false beliefs, your prejudices, or your pathologos. So most things are going to be both true and false, but we can apply the art of the logos to it to discern the true from the false. And this is the upgrading from advice, because most advice is going to be in there somewhere. Personal advice, opinions. If we add the art of the logos, we can go from an advice, which is these are my opinions, to dialectic. So we can use the art of the logos to discern which is true and which is false. And you could say we purify ourselves from what is false and we perfect ourselves according to the truth. There's our true and false here. So what's absolutely false is our pathologos, the false image, the shadow of being. So let's go shadow of being. And this is actual being. Equally so, we could say the virtues are up here. Of course, that's why we have courage. Courage is to follow what the logos directed towards being using the dialectic says is true, even though what feels true might be our vices. Hey, I'm mastering my gambling problem so I can get wasted every weekend. That's a vice. So we can say, you could say, well, this is what's true, the ladder up. What's false is its shadow. But most people are between. Most people are in here, somewhere between, what's this, 0 degrees and 90 degrees. Somewhere in this degree. They're in a acute angle. Oh, math humor. So, and let's go back to Socrates. And again, we've got to see it in the text. Okay. Okay. Don't desire the corporeal realm. That will bind you to the body. You'll be beguiled by things that you can eat, touch, see, drink, and use for sexy times. You don't want to think that is most what did he say? Real and clear. Most clear and most real. So that's the chaining yourself to the body, the self-imprisonment, he calls it. He says self-imprisonment. Delivering your soul to the pleasures and pains, thus imprisons yourself again. But you want to be in the true and the divine, and behold the unopinable. What we said is beyond belief, and will escape from our human ills. And Socrates looked at the logos that self had spoken. Interesting. So that flow state we've been talking about, looking at the logos. Yes, we can be prophetic, like dreams can be prophetic, so long as we are mastered by Apollo. But we are looking for okay, let's say worthless. Here we go. In this way, the very useful, the very beneficial, and the very worthless are both very rare. The majority are between these extremes, just as the very short and the very tall. So if there's anything more rare than extremely tall, a Wimbinyama, or an extremely short man, mini-me, or a dog, or anything else? Vern Troyer, I think the actor's name is. Just so I'm not... I don't mean it mini-me disparagingly. Or the well-formed or the deformed, extremely fast or slow. So if there's a case of the abundant and plentiful are between them. right? We need to use the art of the logos to discern that. So you could say one way of defining the art of the logos, that's pretty cool. So we can do a dialectic on philosophy, and we can use as our definition, could use the art of the logos. But then, seeing as that's important, we might want to do a dialectic on the art of the logos. How would you define that? How would it demonstrate itself? Well, one way of defining the art of the logos is to be able to discern or purify or perfect this. If not everything, what does he say? The majority are between these extremes. Rare to have a very, very little dog. So little it can you can barely see it. It might be a baby. You allow babies, so you allow the dog. That kind of little dog, very rare. Very big dogs are rare too. So you could say the art of the logos is to be able to discern the true and false, because the majority are through here. But it's also to judge, where are you? And recognize, hey, someone who's completely trustworthy is rare. Maybe Socrates. Someone who's completely worthless is rare too. Maybe Hitler. Most people are between Hitler and Socrates. Between the false and the true. Equally so for logos and opinions and advice. So that's the cool thing that we can see. So our task today has been, our task from here forth on will be to master the art of the logos, match Socrates where he's at, become a hero like him. And we didn't really get into much reading today, but that's okay, because we've seen more about our task, what the art of the logos might be. So when we read the next argument, Cadmus, Cebes' argument, where in here can we see him? Notice, we've been saying before we start the dialectic, we can ask two questions, where you're at or where you're stuck. But actually, as we've been going, it seems Socrates asks that in a single question. He'll say where you're at or where you're stuck, but he won't say both. In other words, he'll say, oh, where are you at in the understanding? But he'll be meaning you'll be somewhere here. Or where are you stuck? Where were you stuck by telling him where I'm stuck? Say, well, I followed along the logos to here, but then I got stuck with this personal belief. So really, this where you at and where you stuck are two ways of asking the same question. That question being, where in this acute angle between truth and its shadow, the false, between the virtues and its shadow, the vices, between being and our pathologos image of being that will bind us to our fate. Where between fate and destiny are you? And Socrates seems to be asking that before he starts. So now that we have that in our back pocket, when we do read next week, we'll see, does Socrates start by asking, where in this section are you? Because his job, therefore, as a midwife, would be to purify him from what is false and perfect him up what is true. That would be, wouldn't we all agree, beneficial. Kind of like the doctor and the personal trainer, as we saw in the text, combined. Which is cool, because our whole theme today has been, what's the ideal? What's the ideal hero? What's the ideal hero's journey? What's the ideal way of being? What's the ideal way of living so that you will trust you could not be going to a better place when you die had you lived any other way? What's the ideal? So in the text, advocate for a logos, there we go. In the text we talked about all of these ideals. And we have to match him in these ideals. Well, in the text, Socrates mentioned he dropped that clue, dialectic. You can relate to your soul in a harsh way through physical training and medical treatments. Going to the gym can be difficult. Going to the dentist can be even more difficult. Or you can advise your soul through dialectic conversation. This was one of the last things we read, and it really applies to our conversation in chat with Gaved Up. How do we relate to those voices? The loud ones, which are usually negative, voices from our past, and the quieter ones from the self, or our daemon, a positive daemon. Either way, dialectical conversation. Same thing with dreams. Your dreams are not literal. You have to apply a dialectical conversation to them in dream analysis. So dialectical, first time this word is dropped, after physical training and medical treatments. What's medical treatments? Going from sickness to health, removing what is false, purifying us from our illness, purifying us in the logos from what is false. What is personal training, physical training? Going from health to excellence. So maybe they happen to be in the same paragraph, maybe the dialectic in its ideal form, or as the ideal of the art, would therefore be both medical treatments, purifying from what's false, and physical training, perfecting ourselves in the truth. So that's a hypothesis that we can take. That's from using the text, from applying dialectical reasoning, by creating questions and our own hypotheses. We take it with us and we test it. We verify it from the text. And as we saw today, there seems to be a caring and intelligible nature of the universe, which means it will somehow unfold back and to help us confirm or correct. Like beyond belief was confirmed in the text for us. And trusting the logos was corrected. Not just trusting the logos, but with an art. So this is the helpful nature, the way our dreams help us. We just have to try our best to match it. And we're not going to be perfect. Do not seek the ideal. I mean, yeah, seek the ideal, but do not demand the ideal from you. Well, yeah, like as a standard for just playing. You are going to be in here somewhere. You're not worthless. Don't listen to that voice that says you are. And you don't have to be freaking Socrates. But there is a goal. We may reach it. But to reach it, you have to play. That's the part of the art of the logos. So if you're playing, your dreams will help you. If you're applying the dialectic to your dreams as best you can, or organizing a coffee date with your friends to look at each other's dream and practice the art of the dialectic, not bringing in your own interpretations, what you think is your friend's problem, what you expect to see, none of that. That's interpretation. Just following the logos of the text with the dialectical pattern, and you'll come to questions and solutions. And the dreams will help you and that's what we're trying to do, match it. We match Socrates as being heroes. We match the art of the logos in the text, and we match dreams. And what is the standard by which we match everything? The art of the logos. Same thing to the other problems we talked about today. The problem of learning philosophy at school. Do I have to match Kant? Wouldn't Kant be somewhere around here? Wouldn't Hegel be somewhere around here? Wouldn't Nietzsche be somewhere around here? Yep. Do we match them? Nope. What we do in order to match them is match the art of the logos in order to understand them. Then we can do like that podcast, How Did This Get Made? Because they are screenwriters. They can recognize where the bad movie directors made their mistakes, and they can have fun with it. That's the art of a critic. In the Ion, Socrates talks about that being a true art. Not the creator, but those who can understand and talk about that creation. Requires you to know the paradigm and to recognize where they fall off. That's the art of the critic in the Ion, which is like the art of the philosopher, which is very curious. The Ion is a really interesting book, and we can keep that in our back pocket for when our channel gets to the Ion. It's a little teaser. But for us now, we want to match the art of the logos, which is matching the ideal hero, which is matching also the universe looking at that quote and matching dreams. 4 ways. So we got 4. That's enough to start a dialectic. So art of the logos, dialectic on the art of the logos, art of the logos. We've got we have to match it in ideal hero. This is our model, our hypothesis model for the paradigm of the ideal hero. For reading the Phaedo, literally in the text, Socrates is saying you have to develop the art of the logos in reading the Phaedo, because the greatest defects will come if you just believe me. We talked about matching the art of the logos in dreams. Oh, in the universe. It's entirely possible to verify for ourselves we live in a caring and intelligible universe, which is a kind of proof because it... I forget the rest of it. The verification is a kind of proof, since it is a way of understanding that is based on a realization that our mind constantly communicates with us and for our benefit. If that is so, what we're seeing in our reading is it must be through the art of the logos, because that's art. It must have a benefit, it must have an art. If it's communicating, it's probably going to be communicating through the self-logos. So, the universe. So, match it in the providence of the universe. Match it in guidance. Guidence from our dreams. And we got from the chat, this also involves from dreams prophecy. Prophecy. Some dreams have prophetic, as Socrates is talking about. Now, this is not a dialectic. These are the notes. So I'm not going to do it because one way of matching the art of the logos is to share it with others. The way Socrates is dividing all these terms, these puzzles into the text for us to exercise ourselves through the dialectic. So here you can see the theme of ideal hero, providence of the universe. Now, so if you do a dialectic, one category is going to be if there is an art of the logos, maybe in the demonstration it's going to be its functioning, it demonstrates through the universe. What are the implications of that on others? Providence. So you'll have to separate providence into one category and universe into another category, because the universe has the art of the logos, but if you share in it, what's true is you'll get the providence. What's false is you'll be on your own. What's both true and false is, I don't know, think of something that is true in one way and false in another way. That's a creative exercise. Like before we said, true and false are, what did we say before? It's beneficial in one way, beneficial for our soul, but false, it's both true and false. It's false and it's beneficial for fame or wealth. So these are some notes for you. This is what I'm giving you guys. Guys and girls, of course. Providence of the universe. You're going to have to separate that up yourself. You're going to have to think for yourself. Which category would universe go into? Oh, and providence, isn't that the implications? So maybe it's a different category. Guidance. Oh, prophecy. Where would that come in? So prophecy seems to be within the heading of dreams. Guidance seems to be prophecy might even be under the subheading of guidance. So you have to choose which of these 4 categories: definition, demonstration, division, or synthesis analysis. You have to decide whether you're going to put it, whether the art of the logos is or whether it isn't. And within each of those 4, you can have 3 subheadings: what's true about it, what's false about it, and what's true and false. By the way, 4 categories times 3 subheadings equals 12. Is 12 significant in Greek mythology? That's a question that we can keep open. All right, so we've seen a lot, and we can take all that with us next time when we read. Is Socrates going to start with a question about where you're at, where you're stuck, meaning somewhere in here? And is he going to judge where he's at? And is he going to perfect what's false, or is he going to purify what's true? Or is he going to do both? And how does he do that? Because we want to match him. We want to be as Socratic like ourselves. Because we want to match the ideal hero. We want to live the ideal. Let's add this one in. We also talked about today, to match the art of the logos is to live the best possible life, and also to have the best afterlife, and similar to have the best reincarnation. Something we talked about today as well. Have the best reincarnation. And we also talked about needed for the virtues. So, it wasn't by reading the text, it was by reflecting. So it wasn't by definition, it was by demonstration. How we demonstrated our reading in our own reflections, that we provided all of these terms. So we've got all of these terms which are needed for us to practice, which are the division, which we can do to exercise our own dialectic and unify that dialectic together to gain our own understanding of the art of the logos, which would mean you are matching it. You are becoming, if you do this, you don't have to, but it's fun, and you're welcome to share what you come up with on Discord whenever you like, or just keep it to yourself, or mythologize it if you want to put it in your art. If you do it, if you use these terms and any others that have come to mind for you from our reflection today, you will be matching the ideal hero. You will be actually reading the Phaedo. You will be matching the intelligence of the universe, which might open you up to therefore being more receptive to the providence of the universe. You will be learning what you need to accept guidance from your dreams. You will be awakening a prophecy element within your consciousness, the art of prophecy within your own self. You'll be learning what's needed for that. You'll be living the best life possible if you do this. Wow, isn't that cool?
Wow.
You will have the best afterlife, most probably. So, good news for that.
Wow.
You will probably have the best reincarnation if you do this exercise. And it's needed for the development of your virtues and pull you away from vice. So, good reasons to do anything? I mean, in terms of reasons to do things, in terms of reasons for doing anything, as far as they go, seems to be up there. Pretty high. Of course they're high, because we're talking about the ideal. We're reading Phaedo, the swan song of Socrates, the big dog of thinking and philosophy and enlightenment. If the extremes are rare, then Socrates is definitely one of those rare. So, on that note, on that invitation, and with those stakes, that's what I'm offering today. In the chat, is the midwifery book dense to read? using large vocab, or should I build my knowledge before reading it? Good question. I remember when I first read it, it was very hard. I didn't understand any of it. But now when I read it, it's obvious. It could be either. I recommend getting it and going through it, and you'll find some parts more resonate with you. Like, there are some sections on like chaos theory and mathematics that if you're into that, you know, that kind of stands out. Oh, he gives a section on how the theory of evolution, how it necessitates there being a next level of evolution that we're not at, and that can only happen through philosophical midwifery to be able to address our problems so we can become caretakers of the planet and then reach our personal destiny. So if you're interested in if you're more familiar with evolutionary theory, that section will stick out. Someone yesterday was talking about how they really related to the case studies, because philosophical midwifery is the only empirically verified system of psychotherapy. And of course it is, it's the paradigm, but it's empirically verified in that it works. It should be the model. It's the paradigm for psychotherapy. So he was reading, there are case studies, a couple of people who are case studies within that verification. So he related to their stories, the difficulties that these people were facing. This chatter related to them personally, so you might like that. In other words, there's heaps in there. It's freaking amazing. And so yeah, go through and you might find some parts easier to read than others, but you might read it a year later and you'll be like, holy crap, I can't believe I found this difficult. So that's one way. I reckon just jump in. Another way is if you have friends who are reading it too, that could be worthwhile. Maybe if this channel gets enough interest, then we could justify having a day where we read the book together, have a read along. People can join in Discord, or if they want, they can join on camera or in their voice, or I can read along with people in chat, and that's an option. Another option is there is a book called Unblocking. I think there are two books that go together, but it's the Pocket Pierre. I think the Pocket Pierre and Unblocking are two simpler versions of the philosophical midwifery book, and I think sometimes on Amazon they're sold together. So you might enjoy those first. Unblocking, which is by Dr. Pierre Grimes, and Pocket Pierre, which is by Dr. Pierre Grimes. So you could start with those if you want. But yeah, it's a kick-ass book. I thoroughly recommend it. There's a lot in there. I mean, we'll be unpacking its mysteries for generations to come. Right, so on that note, I hope this has been interesting and informative. I hope, anyone at home, they want to get into philosophical midwifery, which is the application of the dialectic for this one here, addressing the shadow. But as it says in the text, you kind of have to do both. The better you have developed your art of the logos through what we're doing, through this reading, through matching Socrates, the better you are going to be able to apply that to here. So it's kind of a complementary game. And yeah, so you can check out that book if you find it online, and invite your friends. And if there is enough interest, we could maybe even set up on Patreon, maybe a read along for that, or if there's enough support, just a day dedicated each week to reading the philosophical midwifery book. But take this, have fun with it, share your insights, join us on Twitch if you like, subscribe to YouTube if you want, Join the Discord if you're interested, and support on Patreon if that's up. And thank you for joining me, and I hope to see you next time. Take care.